So no functioning boat yet. So I put together this video just because this is what I've been messing with for the past week, and you probably won't learn anything from it, but maybe if you're a tinkerer like me, you might enjoy it. And I'm monetized. I'm adding ads because YouTube's putting them on there anyway, so I might as well get my 2 cents.
This is a little car I made a couple of years ago to ride the grandkids around, and it's been a lot of fun, but it's got some issues. For one thing, it's filthy dirty, but that's no big deal. It's heavy, and because it's so heavy, it's real easy to pinch a tube when you hit a bump. I'm going to try to get some heavy-duty tires, which will help, but one thing I'm going to do is take off these steel fenders, which are actually truck leaf springs, front and back, and replace them with some aluminum pipe. I think between the two it might take off 50 or 60 pounds. Another thing is it's not wide enough for my wife and I to sit comfortably side by side. I'm going to redo this where this actually comes out. We need about 3 more inches. So that's a lot of work, but it'll mean that we can putt around the neighborhood in the afternoon and be a little more comfortable. The main thing is the steering is terrible. I've actually done several videos on the steering. It's still crazy, dangerous. I think it's called bump steer. You'll be driving along, if you hit a pothole, when you get out of the pothole, you'll be going in a different direction, and there's just so much slop between all my homemade little connections. Everyone has a little bit of slop and it adds up. So I'm gonna take that all apart and maybe get some machine work done, or maybe buy some different parts. But anyway, waiting on the boat to come back from the boat shop before I start another big project. I'm gonna bring this over to the foundry and kind of take care of some of these little issues.
So a lot of the car comes apart pretty easily. The whole back hatch area comes off real easy. It's just got a bungee cord holding it on and a plug hooking up the lights. I'm going to set it up on this table so that I don't have to bend over so much. It's going to be just easier to get to everything. I'm lucky enough to have this hoist and a super sturdy table. It's going to make it much easier. So the majority of my steering problems, I believe, is all this slop in all my homemade fittings. I don't have a machine shop, so I wasn't able to use a lathe or a milling machine or anything. I just used what I had that fit, and it came back to bite me. It just doesn't steer well. So to start unbolting pieces, the fenders, the grill, the light brackets, trying to open up everything so we can see what's going on. So a while back I added these fancy little shocks. These are from Motorcycle Steering, and it helped a little bit, but it has not solved the problem. And I took a picture of my wiring because my color coding is pretty special, so I wanted to be able to get it back together in the end without spending too much time on it. So this is my steering. My steering shaft runs parallel with the top of the little place you got to put your feet in, and there's a sprocket and chain that drives another sprocket, and all of this is really tight, very little slack, and then it runs a rack and pinion, and there's a little bit of slack right there, but not a whole lot. And at the end of the rack and pinion, I've got some tie rod and some tie rod ends, and they're really tight, not much slack there, but that's where it goes bad. The I don't know what you call those things, they're bad. A lot of slack right there. There is slack at the end of the leaf springs and all that linkage, and I even have slack. The wheel bearings don't really fit the axle very well. They're kind of loose, so I need to deal with all this stuff and see what I can do to get some of the slack out, make it fit better. My steering geometry is actually pretty good. I have Ackerman steering, so my the wheel on the inside of a turn turns a lot sharper than the wheel on the outside of the turn. I've got some camber and some caster that make it center better. It wants to go straight when you let go of the wheel. That part's not a problem. It's just the slack. And here you can see I was trying in the past. I cut some copper shims and put them around these bolts to try to take some of the slack out, and it helped a lot, but they wore away so fast. Most of it's totally gone. So it turns out I did not have aluminum pipe like I thought I did, but it's just as well, because I do have a lot of this stuff. This is a rub rail off of an old boat. It's aluminum, and I think it's going to work. Singularly, it's not strong enough, but I think if I double them, it'll be strong enough. It'll be like way lighter than what I have, and it's going to be so much easier on my poor shins. I have bashed my shins on this little steel bumper. It is so hard and so heavy. Just a little bump draws a lot of pain. So this material bends really easily. It's pretty soft. Trying to match the existing curve of the existing bumper, because I know it fits with the tire, so I can't get too crazy because it needs to fit back kind of where the black fender bumper is. So just trying to match the curve. I can bend it, I can unbend it, no problem. I got it laid out on my bench here. It has uneven legs. One side of this aluminum extrusion sticks out further than the other side, and that's an advantage, because if I put the short sides to the inside, it makes it easier to put plates and weld things. So for starters, I'm going to weld these two plates, and they are in position to bolt to the existing bumper support, which I'm going to leave because that's my pickup point, and I want it to be pretty strong. I don't want to switch to aluminum with that. So I got it where I want it. We're going to weld it up. I got majority of these first two plates welded, and then I ran out of wire. Unfortunately, I had two more rolls, but they turned out to be stainless, so that certainly wouldn't work. So I still haven't trimmed the ends to length. I'm not quite sure what I want to do on the ends. I kind of like the thought of having a vertical pipe, because then I can always stick flags in those little holes for like parades and stuff. So, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do on the end. But I think it's going to look pretty good. Obviously, I'm going to weld up all these little screw holes when I get some more welding wire. And I may put one little more brace between these main braces, because it has to be strong enough for the kids are always standing on it. So I want to make sure it doesn't bend. But I'll grab me some wire tomorrow, and we'll finish welding up the bumpers. So it's a new day. I got my wire. I'm putting it in a spool gun. I've learned two little tricks here. One is the first foot of wire, try to straighten it as straight as you can get it, because it's naturally has a curve to it coming off this roll. And do not let your thumb off of the roll of wire until you get the tension nut on there, because it'll like do a what do you call that, a rat's nest. It'll spring out, and the little drive motor that's in the spool gun's not strong enough to undo it, and then you got to take it back apart and blah blah blah. So just keep tension on it until you get that little bronze screw on there with the little plastic washer, and everything snaps back together. It's really pretty easy once you've done it a couple of times. So between my 1953 model eyes and my shaky hands and this old pitted aluminum from this boat, I'm not going to win any prizes on this welding, I promise. But we're going to make it so it doesn't come apart. So that's the main thing right now.
This 3/4 aluminum conduit to finish the end of the new bumper, like yo. So I'm going to cut this little curve in both ends. I got it marked with a Sharpie. I'm going to bring it over and see how I can cut that as accurately as I can.
I've got a lot of aluminum with this old miter saw. It's an old wore out miter saw, and the blade's nothing to brag about. Never had an issue, but I still kind of get the EBGBs when I do it. I make sure I keep my face on the backside of the motor just to make sure nothing happens.
I'll leave that much to grind off in the middle. Not too bad.
So I've got it totally welded up, and a lot of grinding and sanding later. I'm down to the last few little spots. So a flat disc on the grinder took care of the majority of the chasing, but I also used my little pneumatic die grinder, and I used my electric Fordham tool, and I used a little bit of everything to try to get into all these little corners and spots. So first bumper is all fabricated and pretty cleaned up. This is the back bumper. I made it narrower than the original because that was probably a safety hazard, having it sticking out like that. Somebody could have clipped something moving along. It would have been not a good thing. It's not mounted. It's going to go right about where the old one is. I thought for a second about polishing them, but that only lasted a second. They're just too old and pitted and corroded, and my welds are too crooked. So I just put a wire wheel on them and kind of made it all uniform texture, and I'll either leave it like that or possibly paint it.
I've drilled 2 holes on each one of these mounting flanges, and on the back I've clamped 2 little square plates of steel like these, but they're already on there. So I'm going to drill and tap the steel 1/4 by 20, and then I'm going to bolt the steel to the aluminum on both sides, and then I'm going to cut the bumper off right here, and set the bumper in place and weld that piece of steel back to the steel pipe. That's my plan.
Here I am trying to pretend I can TIG steel, and I was doing it because the MIG gun was set up for aluminum, and I didn't feel like resetting it up for this little bit of welding, but ended up doing it because I wanted to weld it, and I wasn't getting anywhere with the TIG.
So I tacked my plates, and then I took the bumper off and then welded them as best I could, and then I got the bumper back on. When I get home, I will take the bumper off and put some paint on that steel part where I welded. But, pretty happy with this, even though it didn't save as much weight as I thought. I still think it looks better. And the front bumper I'm not going to do until I get the suspension and the wheels back on, because just moving it a little bit either way makes a difference on how it looks. So I'm going to wait for the wheels. But I'm going to start putting the suspension back together. So I bought this bushing from McMaster Car. It's a steel bushing. My plan was to cut them short, drill out the spring and drill out their front suspension, and slide this little bushing in here, and that would take up the slack for the 8-inch bolt, for the 1/2-inch bolt. But they're still loose. So I went to the hardware store and I found a metric bolt that is almost like, it's a perfect fit. So I got a choice. I can either drill this out to fit this, which I don't know if I can do or not because I don't have a ream, and use the metric bolts, or I can do what I did with the copper shims and leave this hole intact and slice this and push it in there, and then hope I can get the 1/2 inch in there. I don't know. Might do like a little bitty test piece. I got enough. I only need 4 inches, and this is a foot. I've got enough material to do a test piece, so I might do a test piece and see if I split it and not drill this, if it'll tighten up on the 1/2 inch bolt. Give it a shot. So I got about a dozen of these big taper shank bits that somebody had given me. And they were all too big or too small. And I also have some bits that have been bastardized. Somebody's cut the taper off of here and turned it so it would fit in a little drill. And this one was just a little bit too big, so I actually took the grinder and made it a smaller diameter, which is pretty wonky. And then I actually made it duller because when it started to drill, it wanted to jam up in there. So I had success. It's the right size hole. Actually, it's stuck on there now, but it's a snug hole. It's really bent. It's hard to drill with, but I think it'll work. And I got to drill a hole on both ends of the leaf spring, and I got to drill a hole on the cross member. I'm going to have to take it off. So, progress. Wahoo! See if it fits. When you get old, you lose all your arm strength.
I'm removing the front axle from the control rods. This keeps the front axle from rotating, from spinning. They're rigid braces and they head back 3 or 4 feet under the carriage.
Got to go drill these two on the drill press. All right, 4 out of 4. So this is where we started out with the steering arms. A lot of play. Now the bottom tightens up because it's in threads, but the top of this has always been loose. I did have a copper shim in there, which made it better, but the shims, they wear out so fast. So again, from McMaster Car, I purchased this shim stock, and it fits in there nice and snug, even without drilling. So that takes care of that. It's supposed to have a 5/8 hole in the middle, but the 5/8 bolt is a little loose, so I'm kind of hoping I can go metric and tighten that stuff up. This is easy. So we'll cut these to length, slide them in there, and I'm going to have to decide on what kind of bolt to use. It's been a frustrating hour in my truck driving around to the bolt places trying to find a bolt that would fit this bushing that I have in there now. And I guess it's meant for a half, but it's so sloppy, I feel like I'm not gaining anything if I use a half. Metric didn't work, so I went to my friend's shop and stole some of these big bolts. They're too big. I'm going to try to buff them down so they'll fit. We'll see. Put them on the sander and try to make them smaller. So I got my first kingpin turned down. To fit, it's really snug. I know that's not ideal because I did it with the grinder, so it's not, theoretically, it's not really round. It's going to be hitting in just certain points. But you know, this is a little cart that's going to see maybe 5 to 10 hours a year. I think it's going to be okay. So I'm going to get the other one buffed down. In a vain attempt to get this thing round, I'm just covering it with crayon, and then I'm putting it in the hole and pushing and turning, and then take it out, and I can see where it was rubbing right there and right there and right there, and I'll give those a little sand, and I'll just keep on repeating, and every time I'm getting it in maybe another quarter or so, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch. Eventually I'll have it all the way in there and it'll be kind of mostly round. Okay, so I got both shafts fitting pretty doggone good. Basically no play. Now the old hole up here was for a bigger bolt. So what I did was I cut a nut thin and I ground out the middle until it fits pretty tight on the kingpin bolt, and I'm going to weld it around, and that'll shrink up that hole. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. And I think I'm going to drill and tap the kingpin for 1/4 by 20 as a way to lock it into place, because I used to have a nut down there with a thread, but I don't have that anymore. If I'd have been a little smarter and cut them a little longer, I might have could have used a cotter pin, but I think a bolt in there will be a little safer. So I'm going to get these centered as best I can and go ahead and weld this little nut here, and all this is a bushing to close up that hole. Okay, so I got the bottom spacer welded. Now everything's lovely. I got good, no play whatsoever. I'm going to drill and tap the shaft and put a bolt to make sure that it never bounces out. It doesn't turn, it's a fixed thing, but I want to make sure it doesn't bounce out of there. Well, that took a good part of a day, but super smooth. There's no play whatsoever. Both of them are the same. And I got them greased. I should not have to take this apart again. Now I got to get all my bush ends in these things and get them the same length. I'm gonna attempt to solve this problem with shim stock. Since it's not a moving part like the front suspension, I think if I can get some shim in there, it'll stay put because the bearing doesn't turn. The bearing is fixed to the axle. So I was looking for a Coke can, which I didn't have. I looked out on the street, see if somebody threw one, and since aluminum's worth something, you don't see them lying around anymore. I went to the restaurant across the street and they gave me this, and it was full, but I don't drink, so I poured it out. I'm gonna cut it up and make attempt to make a shim, see if the thickness is right. Got the front end back together. The beer can shims for the front wheels are very temporary, but I think they help a little bit. I really just need to get bearings that fit the shaft better. And I'm gonna bring it back home because my woodworking tools are at home, and this widening the body part of the renovation here, that's mostly woodworking tools. So I'm gonna go home and get my neighbor's trailer and come back and get the car and bring it home and start playing with the seat.
So if you've watched the whole video, that's 22 minutes of your life you won't get back, and I apologize for that, but I've been here a week. The boat's still not ready, still messing with the controller and the factory and computer settings. This video is getting long, so I'm going to clip it here. I'll post another video on how I wasted a week of my life messing with the interior. So thanks for watching.